Welcome back to the 30 Years of Summer, right here on Lucha Review. It is the main event of the summer, a supercard. And what better opponent than the Super Nintendo? It's the 30th anniversary of Nintendo's classic 16-bit system. Tag yourselves in, and let's take on the nerdy and dirty. One unfortunate truth about Nintendo, they often seem to drag behind the times. Even in the 80s, when the NES had revived and revolutionized video games, the industry was rapidly changing. Players were soon enjoying better graphics and sound on Sega Genesis and in the arcades, and the future was clear. The early 90s would be the era of 16-bit. Nintendo wouldn't be left out, and in the summer of 91, Nintendo Power teased their loyal fans with images of their next-generation console. It was called the Super Nintendo, and while the name didn't seem all that creative, you could not say the same about its starting lineup. From racetracks to baseball fields to fantastical worlds of mayhem and imagination, the Super NES promised something for every kind of player, and I wasn't going to be left out. The console hit the market in August of 91 with a price tag of around $200. Seems like pocket change today, especially compared to what people are spending for a PS5, but I was 12 at the time, and I wasn't carrying that kind of cash. So every weekend, my dad would slip me a few dollars for mowing the lawn or sweeping the floor of his salon. My dad was proud of me for taking the initiative, and once I had earned a little over $180, he surprised me by picking up the rest of the tab, and I couldn't get my Super NES to a TV fast enough. Thanks, Dad. The console came with Super Mario World, and there was no better companion. I was so blown away that I played that game till 3 o'clock in the morning. It was the latest I had ever stayed up before my high school years, and I remember having to force myself to turn the game off. The colorful characters and backgrounds were detailed with smooth animation, while the soundtrack contained excellent simulation of musical instruments. Super Mario truly was Super Mario, as the silly yellow cape tied around his neck allowed him to fly around the level. That wouldn't be enough, though. The Super NES needed a debut with something big. Like dinosaur big. Enter Yoshi, Mario's dinosaur pal. Truth be told, Yoshi was really more of a mount for our hero and didn't add much to the game's experience, but Nintendo's goal had been met. Yoshi was a hit, and he's been a beloved member of the Mario family ever since. Following Super Mario World was F-Zero, Nintendo's space-age racing game. Players could pick between 4 hovercraft vehicles and race to the finish line on different planets with various weather conditions. There were 4 laps to each race, and being the fastest was the least of your problems. The tracks often challenged you with sharp turns, rough patches, and springboards, and your fellow racers weren't going to let you get to the finish line without a fight. I was never big into racing games, but I happily made the exception for F-Zero. It even came with a mini comic book, which gave more of a story to each driver of each vehicle. With all this considered, I'm surprised the world didn't see too much more of F-Zero. Mario Kart became Nintendo's be-all, end-all for racing games, and their latest title contains an F-Zero track, while Captain Falcon is a playable character in Super Smash Bros. Gone but not forgotten is the highly innovative ActRaiser, which might have seen more success if the name wasn't so nonsensical. In ActRaiser, you play the role of a celestial being summoned to the world below to vanquish hordes of demons. Once you've cleansed the land, you'll be tasked with helping civilization rebuild itself, and you'll be consistently challenged with disasters both natural and unnatural, as well as monsters looking to invade your kingdom. The game was SimCity and Golden Axe rolled into one, and its story, soundtrack, and imagery were equally rewarding. Right beside it is Ultraman. Ultraman was one of many attempts to introduce Japanese pop culture to American audiences in the 80s and 90s, and in it, you wrestled grotesque giant monsters to save the planet Earth. And those were just a few of my favorites from 1991. A few others include Super Castlevania 4 and Draken. These titles were covered in last year's season, so feel free to dip into the archives, and you'll see how Draken inspired me to love all things cheesy, or see why Super Castlevania 4 is my favorite game in the entire Super NES library. Nintendo might fall behind the times here and there, but once they catch up, they raise the bar, because the Super Nintendo is easily championship material. I'd even call it one of the greatest consoles of all time. For sure, its capabilities go above and beyond whatever Genesis does, but that all gets obscured by its library of incredible games, many of which are linked to incredible memories. Most of the footage recorded for today's episode came from title screens and AI demos, but each of them brought me back to a special time in my teen years. Back to a time when I didn't have to worry about replacing a cracked windshield on my car or rush to get to work on time. As a young kid full of angst, the Super Nintendo gave me the perfect sanctuary. I could be a wrestling champion in Monday Night Raw or Saturday Night Slam Masters. I could cross blades with savage barbarians. I could embark on an epic quest with an epic group of companions. I could live vicariously through my favorite cartoon characters. The possibilities seemed endless, and I still enjoy some of these games just as much now as I did 30 years ago. And that concludes this year's 30 Years of Summer event. I hope you've enjoyed these trips down memory lane as much as I have, and feel free to comment on which games or movies you enjoyed best from the summer of 1991. Thanks for tagging in. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you next week.